What is going wrong with Marcus Rashford? We're going to have a look at his form, exactly why we are seeing him underperform for Manchester United, and whether he should be dropped, and if he can get back to his best. Welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe. This is Jay. And it's a bit of a tricky video today, isn't it? Everyone's favourite man in the world, Marcus Rashford, has been massively underperforming recently for Man United. We need to have a look at what's going on, why this is happening, whether we should persevere with him, whether he should be dropped. You know, there's all sorts of things going on in the media at the minute. He wants to go, he's this, he's still injured, he's got this problem, there's that. But like, we need to sort of have a look at exactly what is going on. So before we get into it, let's just start off with the stats. This season, 15 appearances, 3 goals, 1 assist. Last season, 21 goals, 15 assists. The season before that, 22 goals, 12 assists. You know, over 20 goals, over 10 assists for the last 2 years in a row. And now he's looking like an absolute shell of himself when, theoretically, now's the time he's meant to be fit, back from injuries. What do you think's going wrong with Marcus Rashford?
It's a good question. It's the big question, isn't it? And it's a painful one as well, because I was hoping this season would be the season that after he came back from his operation, he'd kick on a little bit. You spoke about those numbers from the last 2 seasons, over 20 goals back to back, which is great. I thought he could actually start heading towards the 30 goal mark, because we've seen a lot of attackers, players who, when they're 22, 23, they're in around the 15 goal mark or whatever, and then they kick on a bit, don't they? And we talk about, I know it seems a bit silly where he's at the moment comparing to these players, but we've seen players like Vardy, like Kane, like Shearer, like Wright, like, even Salah kick on a little bit when they get to a certain age and just start putting up phenomenal numbers. And there was part of me thinking, maybe Marcus could do that. Maybe he could be that player that drops in like 30-odd goals in a season. And if that is going to happen, this is probably the season to see it. And it's gone the other way. He just looks like a shell of himself. Now, you ask him what is wrong or what can we do about it. I was at the game against Villa and the crowd were on his back. It wasn't happening for him. He had a couple of moments sort of in the first half, but he kept giving the ball away. He just looked like he looked like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. The crowd were getting at him. I was hearing things shouted at him that I didn't like hearing from a few people as well. And actually, when he got subbed, I was relieved he got subbed. I thought he needs to come off because it's just not happening for him at all. And I was relieved he got subbed with Bruno, because I thought if he got subbed on his own, he might have got those ironic cheers and all that sort of stuff. There was the moment, wasn't there, with the ball was spilled and he didn't move for it.
I think that's the moment that makes you think this isn't just like a bit of bad form. That felt like a player that I can't. It's hard to say isn't trying or doesn't care or isn't bothered, because it's Marcus Rashford and we know how much the club means and we know his personality generally. But if it was anyone else, you see someone, the ball gets played across, the goalie spills it, you're 5 yards away, the ball is 3 yards from the goalie, and you don't even challenge him for it. You don't sprint to it. You don't fly into the... Like, that's... Anyone else and you'd be saying he don't care.
Marcus Rashford for me, and part of the problem is people then start to rewrite history of Marcus Rashford. You're right, he should be, especially if things aren't happening for you. And I get you might be lacking in confidence, whatever. Just try and put that extra bit of effort in. Try and sort of bust a gut, which is what Marcus has always been really good at. And there's no real excuses for not trying to make that ball. Even if you don't think you're going to get there, at least ask the question. And to just not even bother, I think is pretty unforgivable. But people are now saying, he's been rubbish for 2 seasons or whatever. You've just mentioned his numbers there in those last 2 seasons. Very productive. Yeah. One of the most productive players on the planet. So he's not been rubbish.
No.
And there's been games where he's literally got us the winning goal in games.
He's been working towards being a world-class player. And as a winger, we looked at his numbers at the end of last season. He's one of the highest output wingers in the world over the last 2 years. To get, I think it was nearly almost 40 goal involvements, or what was it, 37 goal involvements last season, similar the season before. That is brilliant for a winger. You know, other than Salah, Lewandowski.
And when we say wing, though, you mean like on the left-hand side or the right-hand side? I know it's not like a traditional winger, but I get what you mean.
That's
it's
the
not striker,
the modern style winger.
Striker.
Other than like the real sort of top 5 or 6 players in the world, he was in that next bracket. And then you think, like you said, he could push on. So we'll go through a few sort of categories here to try and look at some of the factors that may be playing a role or maybe playing a part in this. The first one is the injury, or injuries. We know he had a bad ankle. Yeah. We know he had shoulder surgery. We know he was carrying obviously a bad back before that, and different things in the past. But they were the 2 key ones, weren't they?
Yeah.
He's come back from those injuries and he looks no better and arguably worse than he did when he was playing, carrying the injuries. How do you explain that?
Well, the thing is, like, we've always said this, and this has been my worry about Marcus Rashford is all these injuries and playing with these injuries, it's going to take its toll on him.
Yeah.
It's going to affect him. Now, I've always thought it might affect him later on in his career when he gets like his late 20s or early 30s, whatever. But it might be affecting him now because this is a kid who's not just had injuries, but he's played when he's been injured.
Yeah.
Now, and this isn't a dig at Paul Pogba. I'm not going down now. When Paul Pogba gets injured, he goes away and he doesn't play. He goes away and he does his rehab. He gets himself fully fit until I think he's come back once a bit too soon. He got injured again. But by and large, he goes away. Marcus doesn't, and we know he doesn't. Because we've heard Ole Gunnar Solskjaer come out and say he had an injury. He had his shoulder strapped up. We've seen him hobbling around the pitch against Liverpool because, all right, we'd already made all our substitutes, but he carried on playing. He had to, try anyway. But he did that, and it's affecting him. We knew it would do, and I look at it now and I think this is kind of what we expected. Now that doesn't excuse everything. It doesn't excuse a lack of effort in times. It doesn't excuse what people question attitude. But I think it comes down to confidence. But you have to look at it and go, you can't keep playing someone who's injured and think that isn't going to affect them. And we know for a fact, of all the players we've got, Marcus Rashford is the one who's probably played more games when he's been injured than anyone else.
Today's show is brought to you by SPITCH. SPITCH is a free fantasy football game available in the UK and Ireland to everyone over the age of 18. SPITCH is a fantasy football manager app that allows you to build your own team and battle it out against other managers. Play for free, compete against your friends in communities with a chance to win over £70,000 in weekly prizes. So first of all, you choose your pitch, which all have different rules and games. Some have a cost to enter and some are absolutely free and allow you to win some amazing prizes. There's weekly competitions as well as full fantasy seasons, so there's loads of competitions to enter. There's also tons of stats in the app, which allows you to build the perfect team and select who you want as your captain every week. To download SPITCH, make sure you click the link in the description to get started and play straight away. It's now available in the UK and Ireland, but you must be over 18 to play. Make sure that you check out the terms and conditions and be gamble aware. Speaking of appearances, he's made, internationally and for Man United, he's made over 50 appearances in 5 different seasons already in his career, which, seems, a footballer. Wayne Rooney only ever did it twice. Ryan Giggs, who played the most games in Premier League history other than Gareth Barry, did it twice. Beckham, Scholes did it 4 times. This is in their whole career. He's already done it 5 times. Yeah. Now, that is ridiculous, isn't it? The amount of output he's put in, especially, like you said, so many of those games have been through injury. It's interesting that it's hard to say it's taken such a toll already because we don't know if this is the only thing.
It's a good point because I remember seeing Michael Owen on BT. And Michael Owen, he's obviously ridiculed, is often ridiculed, and lambasted now, and people tend to focus on the negatives of Michael Owen's career rather than the positives, and I understand that because he's not exactly a fan favourite anywhere, is he? United fans don't like him, Liverpool fans don't like him, Newcastle fans don't like him, maybe Stoke fans might have some fondness for him, I'm not sure, but he was saying that he was always criticised for his injuries, and at one point in his career, when he was say 23, he'd played far more games than Beckham, Scholes, I think maybe Butt as well, put together. But he played something, I don't know what the exact figure is, but because he played since he was 17, 18, 19, consistently.
Just all the time.
And those players didn't really start playing until they were in the 20s. He had the much better record in terms of appearances. And the thing with Rashford now, he's played a lot of football for a 24-year-old. You just pointed out there, he's, in 5 seasons alone, he's played, 200, he's made 200 appearances or whatever, or over and this 250 appearances.
And no knock either, but these aren't loan appearances in lower leagues. These aren't coming through. These are for Manchester United in the biggest competitions during a time when pretty much every game is crucial because we're not playing well. We're not walking it. We're not running away with leagues and you can rest and rotate. You're playing in games to fight for top 4, Europa League, and, basically every single match is if you don't win this, the manager's on his last legs. It's such high pressure games at United, and you just think he's had no rest whatsoever.
No, you're right, and those stats again, they sort of paint a picture. What we've seen ourselves, we've seen Marcus Rashford. I remember I think it was against City in the derby when Vincent Kompany goes into his shoulder. He goes down, he's on his shoulder. He plays a week later against Chelsea, I think it was, and all he says we have to strap him up to play him in a game, a must-win game to try and get us into the top 4. We saw it against PSG, he comes off of his shoulder. Again, all he's saying, he had a shoulder injury. I mentioned the Liverpool game, he's hobbling about on his ankle. He had an ankle problem where he didn't have an operation where he was due on. Again, it's okay, you can look at it and go, well, he's willing to do that. He could say, hang on a minute, I need to take a step back. But if me or you were offered the chance to play for Manchester United, we'd probably do the same. Every time, we need you. Do you think you can put a bit of strapping on? You can get out there and help us out. We need a win today. We need a goal. Yeah, I'll do it. And he's a United fan. That's what he's about. So I think it's easy to look at the recent performances and go, his head's dropped. He doesn't want to be here, or he's not giving us his all. That's fine, and you can have that argument, but don't dismiss what he's done for the last 6 or 7 years, where he has played through injury, he has played a lot of football, he has got us a lot of important goals. You can't just start rewriting history. I saw it with Steve McLaren. Sorry, I know I'm going on a little bit. I saw it with Steve McLaren. I didn't see it. I saw it quoted. I read it. He's on Talk Sport saying that Marcus Rashford questioning his attitude, and he's saying if he has a bad first half, he never has a good second half. That's nonsense. That's just not true. This is the Marcus Rashford who scored last minute winners against PSG twice after having a stinking first half. You're just making things up now. You're just lying, and people are going, oh yeah, that's true. Well, it's not. One of the best traits Marcus Rashford has got has been he is a type of player, if he is having a bad first half, can turn up for the second half. We've seen him get late goals against the likes of Wolves, against the likes of Newcastle, late goals in the second half against the likes of Chelsea, where he hasn't had a good first half, but he's been able to come up with a goal or an assist or produce something in the second half. So you can't just go making stuff up and going, actually, yeah, that's right. Because it isn't.
No.
So, yes, have a conversation about what he's not doing right, which is worth having, because that's why we're having this chat now, is he's not playing well. But don't start making stuff up like he's never played well in the second half after a bad first half. Yeah. He's been poor for years now. Because I think with Marcus Rashford, there have been performances that haven't been great, but he's always produced. He's always been able to produce, and he's had to do it a lot of the time when it's only been him and Bruno who've done that.
Yeah, exactly. Let's move on a little bit. You kind of mentioned some of the mentality stuff, but you made an interesting point before about there are a few players in this squad at the moment, namely Shaw, Maguire, Bruno to a lesser extent, but still a certain extent, Rashford, who Wan-Bissaka even you could maybe put in that list as well, who were big Solskjaer men.
Yeah.
Or they were Solskjaer's men. We don't know how much they loved him or whatever, but it seemed that they played for him, they turned up for him, they were the first names on the team sheet. All of them are suffering now. I mean, and they were before while Solskjaer was still there, so it's not as though Solskjaer gets sacked and no one can play football anymore. But do you think that has anything to do with the turmoil at United? The fact that we've gone from this guy who, from what we see from the outside, is a little bit more arm around the shoulder in Solskjaer, is a little bit more, play for the badge, enjoy yourself. But obviously, he's not doing no tactics, but it's a little bit more that way. And then you bring in Rangnick, who is the opposite of that, who is machine, who is oiled, who is you stand here, you do this, we press, this is this, energy, intensity, work harder. Do you think that that's had anything to do with it? Because is it just a coincidence that all of United's best players and Solskjaer's main men are now playing terribly this season?
No, I don't think it's a coincidence. So I think you make a good point, and you're right. Because we know, like, for example, Rashford and Solskjaer, from what we saw, well, we know he picked him all the time. Yeah. We know he constantly picked Marcus Rashford. You saw him on the touchline. He seems to have a sort of good communication between him. Rashi this, Rashi that, shouting to him. Not rollicking him, but, Rashi, get on him, or Rashi this. They seem to be quite close. And I don't look too much into social media posts, because half the time it's not even the player doing it or whatever, and anyone can post them. But he used to tweet quite a lot about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer being a legend, and there was the picture when they went away to the warm winter training or whatever it was in Dubai, and he's like, learning from legend, telling me about his 99 winning goal, that sort of stuff. They obviously had that. And I think maybe Rashford, he's probably gutted. He's lost a manager that believed in him and shown that faith in him, feels like he might have let him down. I mean, again, it's speculation, but he might feel like, this was a guy who showed his faith in me, and we weren't able to reciprocate because he ended up getting sacked. Yeah. So maybe there is a little bit of that, because you've gone from an environment, like you said, where Jose could be very prickly, very critical, wasn't really a player's manager in terms of putting his arm around him and protecting him, to a manager that does the opposite, shows you that faith, shows you that protection as well, sticks up for you. We saw it when Ollie said those things, didn't he, about Rashford focusing on his football and not his sort of his, I don't want to say political, his charity work, should we say. And then he came out and did a press conference. Or, he was already due to do a press conference. It wasn't like he called a special press conference. But when they had a press conference with Rashford, he addressed it. And he said, let me just put one thing straight. I'm very proud of Marcus. That was what said. Not many managers would do that.
No.
They wouldn't. Managers, they're not like, they don't like admitting they said something wrong, or they misspoke, or they didn't mean what they said.
Get out the point the way they wanted to. Yeah.
And he did that with Marcus next to him. And I think that shows you the level of sort of respect that he had, and as they had for each other. That they were, they didn't want to fall out or make it become a thing. And now you've got a manager, Ralph Rangnick seems to be quite friendly as well towards him, but it's not Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. It's not the manager that more or less said to Marcus Rashford, "You're my main man," because He kind of was.
He was, and it is weird, and I can't. The thing that I find difficult to sort of work out in my head is it didn't start after Solskjaer ended or after Solskjaer left and his tenure ended. It started before that, and that's kind of one of the things, not just Rashford, obviously, but the performances of the main men, that spine, that sort of, Pogba obviously out the window, but Pogba, Bruno, Rashford, Maguire, Shaw to a certain extent as well. They're the players that kind of cost Ole his job one way or another because it's the performances. And I'm not saying it's like you fucked up and so he had to go, but all of these players who were so good the season before now are terrible, and we're losing points because of it. That's why managers get sacked.
You're right, but I think with Rashford it's quite different because his only league goals this season came under Ole.
Yeah.
So yes, you're right, he wasn't playing great, but he came back from his operation, was still, scored a couple of league goals before Ole got sacked.
True.
Admittedly, he wasn't great against Liverpool and City. I'm not going to say, he played well under Ole. He didn't.
No.
Also, with Rashford, you can look and go, he didn't have a pre-season.
Yeah.
These were his first few games coming back into it. And he was sort of thrown in the deep end a little bit because he was just won big games. Whereas the likes of Maguire, Shaw, the other players we've spoken about, Wan-Bissaka, who didn't even... I know Rashford barely kicked the ball for England, but he still was in part of the tournament. Aaron Wan-Bissaka didn't even have any internationals this summer. That's slightly different where you look at him and go, okay, they have had more games, more warm-up, or more pre-season, where Rashford didn't have any of that. But you're right. I mean, it wasn't like he came back in and helped Ole keep his job. He came back in, got a couple of goals, but ultimately it wasn't the Marcus Rashford that we've seen in previous season. I just feel like there are mitigating circumstances for that.
Let's move on a bit then and address something that is often either bubbling under the surface of people's criticism of Rashford or is an apparent, obvious sort of forefront criticism of him. The whole distractions thing, the whole... not focusing on his football. And you mentioned the Ole thing there. I think he misspoke and didn't quite get his words the way he wanted to, but he clarified it. But a lot of people do think that. The charity work, and again, I'm not going to say it's political because it shouldn't be. The charity stuff, the off-the-field stuff is very, an altruistic kind of big person in society, not just football. And some people go, well, he's distracted. No wonder he's not playing very well. He's spending too much time doing this. Just address that, because to me it's absolute bullshit. But it gets said all the time. Do you think that plays any role in his poor performances this season?
I don't know. I mean, it's difficult. Only he will know that. I don't necessarily think it's distracting. I wonder whether it's the feeling of pressure. I wonder whether it's feeling, because we joke about it, don't we? And everyone tweets it. Whenever the Tories or ever, do something we don't like. Even Labour do something you don't like. Marcus, you need to have a word. Yeah. Marcus needs to sort this out. Rashford, we need to get Rashford on the case. What, they're not doing free school meals? What, they're not going to cut the universal credit? Get Marcus Rashford on the case. There's and a lot of it's jovial, but there is an element of, well, he has changed, made the government do a U-turn twice. Maybe he can do this again. There is that pressure of he's getting lots more press attention. We saw it, I think there was a Spectator were doing an article on him about his social media. He spoke out about that, and then I think they didn't end up doing it. I think he might have even spoke to himself in the end. We've seen him, like a lot of American publications, I think Vogue and one or two Vanity Fair or whatever have done pieces on him. He's had chats with Barack Obama. There's a lot of attention on Marcus Rashford.
Yeah, he's more than a footballer now,
yeah,
isn't he?
and I wonder whether, I don't mean that some people look at it and go, that he thinks he's the big arm. I think it might maybe even the other way around, where there's a lot going on. There's a spotlight on him, and that's affecting him a little bit, because he's probably the most famous soccer player almost in the world at one point. Because you had, and I say soccer because you had a lot of Americans talking about him who wouldn't be talking about him normally, and other players normally. The whole of the UK was talking about him constantly for about a month. You had him being discussed in Parliament and places like that where no other footballer was getting talked about. And it wasn't just about his football. It was about, obviously, what he was doing off the pitch. Then you go to the Euros, he misses that penalty, and you have another stuff where he's getting a lot of criticism, he's getting stick, he's getting abuse. Some of it was racial abuse as well. His mural was damaged. So there's all this attention again, and a lot of it's negative. And he's, so he's had, it's not just the positive attention on it, he's had a lot of attention. And I wonder whether that is a bit like, this is a lot now. Whereas I don't think personally he needs to focus on his football as such. I think, you can still do your bit. I think it just needs to be tempered a little bit in terms of maybe other people need to stop putting as much pressure on him. I don't think that what Marcus Rashford is necessarily doing is distracted. I don't think even the last few months you've seen him doing as much as he was previously. I think people just have this expectation of him. I think maybe we should be looking at, why we're not questioning what Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer are doing. I would say it's Marcus Rashford every time there's a decision we don't like in the government or whatever. It just seems a little bit like we're putting too much on a
He has
24-year-old
become
kid
a
from
public
Withenshaw.
hero, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. You know, and like what's the old saying? You know, you either live long enough to see yourself become the villain or die the hero. And he's been this hero, and then with one missed penalty, he's the villain.
Yeah.
And then now United fans are turning on him. And not only turn on him, but like we said earlier, in some cases, saying not only is he not good at the minute, he's never been good, which isn't true.
Well, let's move on to that then. Going forward, what has to happen here? Drop him, take him out the squad, put him in the reserves, keep playing him. Like, you go on.
For me, there's two options with a player who's massively out of form. When you boil it down to a binary choice, you play him through it, or you drop him.
Yeah.
Those are it. Now there's way you might just okay, well we'll just he plays half or whatever.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd take Marcus Rashford out of the firing line.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
The other night against Villa, it pained me to see the reaction he was getting of people. And I'm not just going to start slagging people on shouting, because some of them I know, some of them are mates.
Yeah.
But he was shouting some pretty horrible things. And I'm like, I hate seeing this. And I was even saying to people around me, he needs taking off. And he's taking off for his own good. And in the end, he got took off in, the 88th minute or whatever it was. I don't know the exact time. It was late in the game when Elanga and Lingard came off on for him and Bruno. But I was like 20 minutes before that, I was like, just get him off, man. He's having a stinker. Yeah. And I think he needs to be taken out of the firing line. Because it's weird because, we've spoken about how Marcus Rashford has played for injury. He's done this, he's done that for the last 2 years. Yeah, you said he's had, like you pointed out, he's had 5 seasons where he's played over 50 appearances for club and country. And yet now he's getting hammered. And yet on the other side of the fence, you've got, on the coin, you've got Phil Jones, who didn't play for 2 years, has a good game in a defeat to Wolves, and everyone loves him again.
Yeah.
And it's like...
It's amazing how fast it turns.
It is.
And we've seen that whole thing again with Maguire and Shaw, perfect examples. At the end of last season, they're like 2 of the best in their position in the world.
Yeah.
People talking about.
Team in the tournament Euros,
people talking about him moving up to being a world-class player. 2 months later, he's shit, drop him. And I think Rashford has to get dropped.
I think
as much as it pains
when
me
we
to
say dropping as well, if you drop someone, let's say with the next game after this is Aston Villa away in the league, you say, okay, we're resting him. He's on the bench. 60 minutes in, we're 1-0 down. You're bringing him on. No. That's not resting him.
No.
That's not taking him out of the firing line. That's, yet again, putting the pressure on Marcus Rashford to get you the result.
Yeah.
That's, if he doesn't have a good game, more stick. Say to him, listen, let's have a few weeks off. Let's just take a step back. Now, we need Marcus Rashford, a good player, but we don't need the Marcus Rashford we've seen at the moment.
No.
We need the Marcus Rashford that we've seen over the last couple of seasons. So give Ante Elanga or even Diallo, if he's still around, give one of them a chance. We've got Ronaldo. We've got Sancho. I know he's injured at the minute. We've got Edinson Cavani. We've got options attacking-wise. We're not as reliant on Marcus Rashford as we have been a couple of seasons ago, where it's been Rashford or bust. So take him out of the firing line, and hopefully you can get a response. I've seen it in the past with players. I've seen it in the past with United legends. There was a time when Teddy Sheringham, after his first season, this was before social media, people saying, flopped. He ain't good enough. I remember, I think it was Monaco in the Champions League, he had a bit of a stinker. In his first season, we got knocked out in the quarterfinals. He's not good enough. We should never have bought him. He's not fit to lace Cantona's boots, all that stuff. Andy Cole, his first season, remember we lost the league to Blackburn. His last game of the season at Upton Park, he missed a load of sitters. Well, good chances. Oh, he's not good enough. It took him a few seasons, and it took at one point where both of those players were taken out. And when York came in, I thought it was going to be York and Solskjaer who were the starting pair, and it ended up obviously becoming York and Cole. Sheringham was like a bit part player, gets his chance in the Champions League and the FA Cup finals.
The most crucial goal.
Yeah, and then I think the season or a couple of seasons after, he's Premier League top scorer, PFA Player of the Year. So give him a proper break. And these were players in Cole and Sheringham. I use them as an example because that's the sort of the highest level you can look at, who weren't at the beginnings of the career. They were, Sheringham I think was in his 30s and Andy Cole was in his mid-20s. So they weren't in their infancy, and they'd been at the club a little while, especially in Cole's situation. So just take him out for a few games.
Yeah.
See how he's getting on. Listen, Marcus Rashford has done enough for Manchester United to deserve to be able to be taken out mid-season. He really has. He's played through the pain barrier. He's played through injury. And if it means we get a better Marcus Rashford and Marcus Rashford at the top of his game at the end of it, then I'm all about that.
Couldn't agree more with that, Jay. Yeah, I mean, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Does he need to be dropped? As much as it pains us to see it and to say it, he hasn't been good enough recently. And that, not chasing after the ball, those sorts of things. When you start to question someone's mentality and work rate, and especially Marcus Rashford, I think it's time to say, right, take a step back. Let's pull him out and see what can happen in a few weeks' time. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Can you explain why we are seeing what we're seeing from Rashford? And you know what? Let us know Maguire and Shaw and Bruno as well, because it's not just Marcus, but obviously he is one of the talisman of the team. what is going wrong at Manchester United and with Marcus Rashford. And if you aren't already, make sure you check out SPITCH. We mentioned them earlier in the video. They are our sponsors today. Click on the link in the description, download the app, and check them out. Also, if you aren't subscribed, make sure you click that subscribe button. Thank you very much, Jay, for joining us. Thank you for joining us at home. We'll see you in a bit.